The room went silent the second I walked in. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. My sister's smile cracked down the middle like glass hit with a hammer. She thought her wedding day was going to be the best day of her life. She had no idea it was about to become the day she lost everything. 3 months earlier, I was the woman everyone felt sorry for. Let me show you exactly how that changed. Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we start, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight, and if you're new here, hit subscribe because these stories only get more intense from here. Stay until the end because the twist in this one is something I don't think you'll see coming. Let's get into it. My name is Sarah, and for most of my life, I believed family meant loyalty. I believed that no matter what happened out in the world, the people who shared my blood would always have my back. I learned the hard way that blood doesn't guarantee anything. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones capable of hurting you the most, simply because they know exactly where it will hurt. I was 31 years old, married for 4 years to a man named Nathan. On paper, our life looked good. We had a modest house on a quiet street, steady jobs, Sunday dinners with my parents, and a relationship with my younger sister, Claire, that I would have called unbreakable. Claire was 2 years younger than me, the kind of person who lit up every room she walked into. Growing up, I never resented her charm. I loved her. I protected her. When our parents fought, I was the one who sat with Claire in her room and told her everything would be fine. I thought that bond meant something permanent. My mother, Diane, had always had a particular way of looking at Claire, a softness she never quite gave me. I used to tell myself I was imagining it. Claire was the baby, I reasoned, and babies get spoiled. My father, Walter, was a quiet man who avoided conflict the way other people avoid storms, ducking inside and waiting for it to pass rather than standing in the rain to fix anything. I didn't think much of any of this at the time. Families have their patterns. I told myself ours was ordinary. Nathan and I met at a friend's birthday party when I was 26. He was funny in a dry, understated way, the kind of humor that crept up on you instead of announcing itself. He worked in finance, wore his ambition quietly, and had this habit of remembering small details about my day and bringing them up days later, which made me feel truly seen. We got married 2 years after we met, in a small ceremony with string lights and a band that played until midnight. Claire was my maid of honor. She cried during her toast. I remember thinking I had never loved my sister more than I did in that moment. For the first 3 years of our marriage, life moved the way it's supposed to. We built routines. We talked about buying a bigger house, maybe starting a family in a year or two. Claire came over for dinner most Sundays, sometimes with a boyfriend, sometimes without. Nathan liked her. Everyone liked Claire. That was never the problem. The problem started so quietly that by the time I noticed it, it had already taken root. It began with small things. Nathan started working later than usual, citing a big account he was managing. He'd come home distracted, answering my questions half a beat too late, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. I didn't think anything of it at first. Marriages have seasons. Some months are just busier than others, but then I noticed Claire pulling away too. She stopped answering my texts as quickly. She canceled dinner twice in 1 month, which wasn't like her. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd laugh it off, tell me work was crazy, tell me not to worry. The night everything shifted for me happened at my parents' anniversary dinner. We were all sitting around the table, my mother fussing over the pot roast, my father pouring wine he barely drank himself, when I looked up and caught something in the air between Nathan and Claire. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a touch or a whispered word. It was a look, quick and practiced, the kind of look two people share when they've learned how to communicate without speaking. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself grief and stress from work were making me see things that weren't there. A week later, I found the receipt. It was tucked into the pocket of Nathan's jacket when I was doing laundry, a hotel just 20 minutes from our house, dated for an afternoon when he told me he was at a work conference. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading it. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was for a client meeting. Maybe I was overreacting. I wanted so badly to be wrong that I almost convinced myself to throw the receipt away and forget I ever saw it. But something in me wouldn't let it go. I called my best friend Renee that same night. Renee had been my closest friend since college, the kind of friend who tells you the truth even when it costs her comfort to do it. She didn't tell me I was crazy. She told me to trust my gut, and she offered to help me find out what was really going on. Over the next 2 weeks, we pieced things together carefully, quietly. Renee helped me check Nathan's calendar against his stories. She helped me notice the pattern of Claire's canceled plans lining up exactly with Nathan's late nights. The proof, when it finally came, was worse than I imagined. I found messages on a backup of Nathan's phone that he'd forgotten was still syncing to our shared computer, an old habit from before we were married. The messages were between him and Claire, not friendly messages, not sisterly concern, messages that span months, full of the kind of intimacy that leaves no room for interpretation. My own sister, my own husband. building an entire secret life in the spaces between our Sunday dinners and family holidays. I confronted them together at my parents' house because some part of me needed witnesses, needed the people who claimed to love me to see the truth with their own eyes. I remember my hands were steady even though my voice wasn't. I laid the messages out on the kitchen table. I watched Claire's face go pale, watched Nathan's jaw tighten as he searched for words that would never be good enough. I expected shame. I expected apologies. What I got instead was something that broke me more than the affair itself. My mother spoke first, and what she said still echoes in my mind. She told me I needed to calm down, that I was making a scene, that surely there was a reasonable explanation if I would just stop shouting long enough to hear it. When I told her there was no explanation that made this okay, she said something I will never forget. She said I had always been the difficult one, the one who made everything harder than it needed to be, and that maybe if I had been a better wife, none of this would have happened. My father said nothing at all. He sat at the head of the table, staring at his hands, offering no defense of me, no accusation toward them. His silence was its own kind of betrayal. Claire cried, but her tears felt rehearsed, aimed at winning sympathy rather than expressing regret. She told me she never meant for it to happen, that these things just happen sometimes, that she hoped I could find a way to forgive her someday because family was supposed to be forever. I remember laughing, a short, ugly sound, because it was the most absurd thing I had ever heard. She had spent months in hotel rooms with my husband, and she wanted me to comfort her about the guilt she felt for it. In the weeks that followed, I discovered something that hurt almost as much as the affair itself. My mother had known, not everything, but enough. She had noticed the signs months before I ever did, and instead of warning me, she had chosen to protect Claire's secret, telling herself it wasn't her place to interfere. When I found this out, something inside me went quiet in a way that felt permanent. I realized the family I had spent my whole life protecting had never really been protecting me back. Word spread through our extended family the way it always does, fast and distorted. By the time it reached my aunts and cousins, the story had shifted into something softer, something that painted Claire as confused and vulnerable, and painted me as cold and unforgiving for not simply accepting an apology. I was removed from the family group chat within a month, quietly, without explanation, as though erasing my presence from a phone screen could erase the truth of what had happened. I was uninvited from my cousin's baby shower because, as my mother put it, she didn't want any tension. The tension, apparently, was my existence, not the affair that caused it. I moved out of the house Nathan and I had shared and into a small apartment across town. For a while, I let people believe I had crumbled. I stopped posting anything online. I stopped attending family events altogether. I let the silence do what silence does, let people fill in the blanks with whatever story made them comfortable. What none of them knew was that behind that silence, I was building something. Renee was the one who first mentioned Vanessa Cole, a lawyer she'd worked with years earlier during a business dispute. Vanessa had a reputation for being sharp in a way that made people nervous, the kind of attorney who read contracts like other people read novels, hunting for the sentence hiding in plain sight that changes everything. I met with her for the first time in a small office downtown, and I remember she barely looked up from the folder in front of her when she asked me to tell her everything, every detail, no matter how small or embarrassing it felt. What Vanessa found changed the direction of everything. Buried in an old family trust document, one my grandfather had set up decades earlier for the family business, was a clause tied to inheritance and conduct, the kind of old-fashioned language families rarely bother to update. It stated that any beneficiary found to have engaged in conduct that brought public disgrace or legal liability to the family enterprise could be excluded from further distribution at the discretion of the surviving trustees. My father was one of those trustees, my mother was another, and here was the detail that mattered most: Nathan wasn't just my husband anymore. Because of his position managing certain family investments, an affair conducted so recklessly, so publicly documented in messages and hotel receipts, could be framed as exactly the kind of disgrace that clause was written to protect against. There was more. Through Renee, I learned that Nathan had recently pulled Claire into a business opportunity involving a family friend named Gregory Hale, a wealthy investor who had done business with my father for years. Gregory was preparing to fund a new venture that Nathan wanted to lead, using a portion of the family trust as collateral. If word got out about the affair before that funding closed, Gregory would almost certainly walk away rather than risk his reputation being tied to scandal. And then there was Dana. Dana had been a friend of Claire's back in college, someone Claire had drifted away from over the years, someone with her own history of being burned by my sister's choices. Renee tracked her down through a mutual acquaintance, and what Dana told us over coffee one afternoon made my stomach turn all over again. Years earlier, before Claire had ever met Nathan, she had done something eerily similar to another friend's relationship, a smaller-scale betrayal that had quietly ended a friendship and nearly ended a marriage that wasn't hers to end. Claire had a pattern. She had simply gotten better at hiding it. I sat with all of this information for weeks, letting it settle, letting Vanessa build the case carefully instead of rushing. I didn't want revenge born out of anger. I wanted the truth to simply be allowed to exist in the open, in front of everyone who had chosen comfortable lies over uncomfortable honesty. If that truth happened to have consequences, I decided I wasn't going to be the one to soften them anymore. 6 weeks before the wedding, invitations went out. I wasn't on the list, which didn't surprise me. Claire and Nathan had decided to move forward with a wedding of their own, an elaborate affair at a vineyard just outside the city, the kind of event with a live string quartet and a guest list that included half the people who mattered to our extended family and my father's business circle. My mother threw herself into planning it with an enthusiasm that told me everything I needed to know about where her loyalty had finally settled. I spent those 6 weeks quietly finishing what Vanessa and I had started. She drafted formal notice to the trustees regarding the conduct clause, timed carefully so it would not be filed until the day of the wedding itself, ensuring maximum visibility among the people who needed to see it. Dana agreed to be present, willing to speak the truth publicly if given the chance, tired of watching Claire walk away from consequences that other people paid for. Gregory Hale, once informed quietly through a mutual contact of the affair and the business risk it posed, made it clear he intended to reconsider his investment the moment the truth became public knowledge. The day of the wedding arrived bright and warm, the kind of golden afternoon that seems designed for photographs. I wore a simple charcoal dress, nothing flashy, nothing meant to steal attention through appearance alone. I didn't need the dress to make a statement. I had spent months making sure the truth would do that for me. I arrived just as the ceremony was ending, timing it deliberately so the reception would be in full swing, so there would be no easy way to quietly usher me out without an audience noticing. Claire looked radiant in her ivory gown, laughing with guests near the edge of the dance floor, Nathan's arm around her waist like he'd never worn another woman's ring before hers. My mother spotted me first. I watched the color drain from her face as she began moving toward me, already forming the apology she thought would smooth things over before I caused a scene. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to. I walked calmly toward the small stage where the band had just finished a song, and I asked to borrow the microphone for a moment, framing it as a toast to my sister on her wedding day. The room quieted, curious, a little uneasy, the way rooms get when they sense something is about to shift beneath them. I kept my words simple. I thanked everyone for being there to witness something important. I told them that today wasn't just a wedding, it was the day certain truths were finally going to stop hiding behind polite silence. I introduced Dana, who stepped forward and spoke briefly, calmly, about the pattern Claire had shown long before Nathan ever entered the picture. Gasps rippled through the crowd, the kind of sound that spreads faster than words can catch up to it. Then Vanessa's associate, present at my request, approached my father and mother with the formal notice regarding the trust, explaining in a quiet but firm voice what it meant for the family's business holdings if the conduct clause were invoked given the documented affair and its overlap with Nathan's management of trust-related investments. My father's face went the color of old paper. Across the room, I watched Gregory Hale set down his champagne glass and quietly walk toward the exit without a word, already reaching for his phone. Claire's radiant smile had collapsed entirely by then, replaced by something desperate and small. She rushed toward me, grabbing my arm, begging me to stop, telling me I was destroying her life in front of everyone who mattered. I looked at her for a long moment, and I told her evenly that I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply stopped protecting her from the truth of what she had already done. Nathan stood frozen near the stage, unable to meet anyone's eyes, understanding perhaps for the first time that the consequences he'd avoided for months had finally caught up to him in front of every person whose respect he still wanted to keep. I didn't stay to watch the rest unfold. I set the microphone down gently, thanked the stunned crowd for their time, and walked out through the vineyard rows as the first arguments began breaking out behind me, my mother's voice rising in panic, my father finally speaking up, though far too late to matter. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was exactly what Vanessa had predicted. Gregory Hale withdrew his investment entirely, and word of the scandal spread quickly enough through business circles that Nathan lost 2 other potential deals within the month. The trustees moved to formally exclude Nathan from any future distribution tied to the family trust, a decision my father, stripped of his ability to look away any longer, ultimately voted to support. Claire's dream wedding, paid for largely through favors and family goodwill, became a source of whispered gossip rather than admiration. Guests who had smiled through champagne toasts that afternoon quietly distanced themselves from both of them in the months that followed. My mother called me nearly every week after that, her voice thinner each time, offering apologies that felt more like requests for relief from her own guilt than genuine remorse. I didn't shut the door on her completely, but I stopped rushing to open it wide either. Some relationships take real time to rebuild if they can be rebuilt at all, and I was no longer willing to pretend otherwise just to keep the peace. As for me, I found a strange kind of peace in the quiet that followed. I threw myself into my work and within the year earned a promotion I had been quietly working toward for a long time. I kept Renee close, grateful every day for a friend who never once asked me to soften the truth to make anyone else comfortable. I started spending my evenings the way I wanted to, not filling space with people who had shown me exactly how little my trust meant to them. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what happened at that wedding, whether I feel guilty for choosing that day, that stage, that microphone. I don't. I spent most of my life keeping quiet to protect people who never extended me the same courtesy. Claire lost her marriage within 8 months. Nathan moved to another city, chasing a fresh start that people who know his history say won't come easily. And me, I finally understand something I wish I'd learned much earlier. Loyalty without honesty isn't love, it's just performance, and performances eventually always find their audience. If you were in my position, would you have done the same thing, or would you have found it in yourself to forgive and move forward quietly? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story kept you here until the end, do me a favor and subscribe because there are more stories like this one coming, stories about the quiet moments before the truth finally breaks through. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.